Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm going to just take a moment, take a deep breath, and get connected. Before we start today, we are going to be talking about how you can discover your intuitive channels. So just take a moment. And with me, if you haven't taken a deep breath today, just take a moment. Sometimes it's just taking the blessing of a pause in our life, just to take a little moment to give to yourself out of all the things that are happening and all that you're doing that is just the most rewarding. It's the most centering. It's the most beautiful. This morning, before I come on, I always try and do a little bit of a meditative exercise. And the one that I was doing this morning was about connecting with joy and starting your day off with joy. And if you've been with me for a little bit, you've probably heard me talk at some point about the energy of unconditional joy and welcoming and inviting unconditional joy into your life. And so it was a great way to bring in a little bit of extra energy, a little extra blessings, and also to center into that we deserve to feel really loved, really connected, and also to be in that space of just allowing our true joy to be in the world unfettered, unfiltered, unmasked, and hidden away. So I want to just make sure that my technology is working on my end. So I'm going to take a second and just check something. And thank you for being patient with me. Okay, awesome. All right, so I want to start with doing a quick message for us today before we get started. It's going to tune in to today. This is just for all of us, a universal message. Okay, we have the waiting game, which can always be a little bit hard, right? Because we have a tendency in this society to be in a space of wanting that instant gratification, wanting to have everything at our fingertips in that moment. And the truth is, we do have everything at our fingertips. Everything that you need is right here, right now, in this moment for you to accomplish exactly what you need. That's the true definition of abundance. You are completely abundant in every way, and every resource you could possibly need is here. So this is just a reminder to settle into that space, that when you are feeling a little bit impatient, when you are thinking about future plans and what if and how can I reach for this, for you to take a moment and be with the beauty of what's here, what's right now. In this moment, ground into you have everything that you need to accomplish what you need, to be present right here, right now, and be living your highest and best version of your life. Okay. So with that message, let's talk a little bit about how you can be discovering your intuitive channels. What are we really talking about when we talk about intuitive channels? And I think that one misconception I really want to address about intuitive channels is that there's something separate from our other senses. In actuality, our physical senses are a extension of our spiritual and intuitive senses. Because instead of being physical human beings first, we are spiritual beings first. So that means our most natural way of communicating is through the blessing of awareness and complete awareness. So when we come into a physical body, that is manifested in how we perceive the senses. So we've got the eyes, we have the ears, we have the blessings of touch, we have taste buds for taste. These are all expressions of how we are aware in the world and how we are showing that physically, because what is happening above is also present below. And in this case, it's present within our body. So the first misconception to get out of the way is that those intuitive channels are separate. In fact, our physical channels and our physical expressions are extensions of the intuitive awareness that you already have, that is your most natural way of communicating and experiencing the world. Okay? So the next thing I want to talk about is when we get into this place where we are opening up the intuitive channels is you move from being like the horse with the blinders on to suddenly being open, being able to be aware of the world that is truly happening all around us. So there's so much that's occurring. We have our loved ones who are visiting us. You have your spirit guides who are coming in, teaching you, guiding you, helping you, giving you messages of support and protection. And very often this is happening in an unconscious way because in a way, sometimes it can be so natural to be connected with the subtle realms that we don't always acknowledge that that is what's happening. So we can have a supernatural experience and feel like, oh, that's just part of things. Okay. And so when that happens, one, it's a blessing because it's showing us this is so natural. This is so easy. This is so part of who we are that it's not this huge stretch, but it's also kind of a negative in a way because it keeps us from really dialing in and tuning into the question of what does this mean and what else is happening, going to that next layer. And really that's the goal with intuitive development is learning not to just be aware of little blips that are happening, but suddenly taking those blinders off and being aware of all these different layers of the world and energy that is happening all around you and how that impacts you, how you can create more meaning from that level of knowledge and understanding, how it can support you in your day-to-day life. Life is really challenging and it's really, really hard, especially when we have these blinders on. So when we're able to see that there's a greater purpose to things, when we're able to see that life continues in new forms and new ways, when we're able to understand that our soul is undertaking an incredible and really amazing journey of evolution, wow, it's so empowering. It's like the butterfly just suddenly sprouts the wings and moves out of the chrysalis and flies away in that incredible sense of freedom. And that's really my passion is I love to help people to connect with that side of themselves. It's the most natural, the most free, the most grounded in unconditional joy by connecting with the spirit world and your natural innate wisdom. So let's get into understanding a bit more about the intuitive channels. I call them in my course the 6 psychic pathways. We're going to talk about 4 of them particularly because people have a tendency to have one particular energy profile or language that they have really honed in and exercised and grown with in their life. It's just something that very naturally you were more inclined to, and so you paid more attention to that and you develop. And that's usually a very unconscious process until you keep growing and decide that, there's more to this world, right? I need to understand myself. And in that quest of asking questions and understanding, I'm being led to that there is more to me than just this body and just these things that I can grab, touch, feel, and know. And so let's dive into there's 4 dominant. So we have 2 that impact us so we can get messages and you can have experiences with those 2 psychic channels, but they're not the primary dominant ones that you usually develop to a high level in unconscious ways, okay? So let's start first with talking about the visionary, which is where you have a dominant language of clairvoyance. And the thing I want to get across today is that these experiences with your psychic pathways are so normal that very often people overlook them. That they just go, okay, this is a normal part of life. This is a normal part of living and experience. And so I'm not even acknowledging that something pretty cool is happening here and what it means when that's happening. You may kind of put it off to, oh, it's a trick of the mind, or am I sure? or it may make you a little uncomfortable, so you sort of ignore it or just consider it a fluke or whatever, okay? But let's look at some of these. So the visionary is where you have a dominant language that you have developed with clairvoyance. So clairvoyance is when you are receiving messages and information through the mind's eye. So that could be when you are looking out in the world, you might see pictures or images kind of like an overlay on things, or you might think of it these days like a more relatable thing is like filters. You can see it with like filters in front of someone or something. Or it can happen when you have your eyes closed or you're just focusing in the center of your head. So you might be experiencing some, early calling cards of clairvoyance or the visionary is if you are seeing little orbs, and usually they're colored. You might see them as colors or you might see them as white, like differing degrees of opacity, moving around in an area. You might see flashes of light. So let's say you're kicking back, you're relaxing on the couch, you're watching TV, one of your favorite programs, you're kind of like zoned out. You're not really paying attention to the other things that are happening in the room. And suddenly you see like a flash in the corner of the room. Like, what was that? And then you that's kind of weird. It must have been something, right? Except for it's dark. It's midnight. All the blinds are closed. The curtains are closed. So you kind of chalk it off as something else. And then lo and behold, there's another flash. It can be either in the same place or somewhere else. So those can be the first indications of things really opening up in your third eye area. And so that's always when it gets really, really exciting. So I want you to pay attention to if those things have happened to you or been happening to you. And if you've had some of these things, please let me know in the comments. Like, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know what you mean. I've had that happen before. I always think it's so exciting when we can just take a moment, even if it's a while later, and acknowledge, wow, that was something cool that was going on. Let me use an example from my mother, who is a visionary and an empath, is that when she was very, very open as a younger person, that became more uncomfortable for her a little bit later. So she, cut it off. She was like, oh, I'm going to put that in a box over here until I'm ready to open that back up and deal with it and explore what that means for her. And so she would later in life go to yoga. And when she would lay down in Savasana after having a really great practice with her teachers, she would begin to have this beautiful wash of purple color swirling in her mind's eye. So just right here in the center. And she just kind of watched this cool lava lamp that was happening and unfolding. Sometimes it was really bright and really intense and seemed like it was moving. And sometimes it was a little foggy, a little duller, maybe a little more gray tones in there. Or it could have been different colors, especially if they had been working on different chakras. So you might see green perhaps if you're having a lot of loving, grateful energy, or there was a lot of work with your heart chakra. So that can be another indication that things are really opening up and you have a lot of strength in your visual center, which would make you what I call the visionary in my intuitive quiz. Some other indicators might be maybe you haven't had some of the visual experiences, but you've had some physical sensations in your third eye area. So that can either be pressure, where it feels like something's opening, like a bud's trying to come open, and it can feel a little bit uncomfortable. You might have even felt buzzing sensations and tingling sensations. I used to get these tingling sensations while I was at work. Not when I was doing this, but when I was working at the psychiatric hospital, and I would get them and they were so strong that it would be really uncomfortable. That was during the time when I was really working on getting that third eye super energized and powerful. So you may be feeling some of those physical sensations in the area of the third eye versus seeing some of the visual things. But if you're feeling some of the sensations here, just keep going, because these other things are just around the corner. They're all connected. Now, we've all seen kind of the dramatic visualizations or imagery in our culture about what clairvoyance is supposed to look like. So that may look like to you suddenly someone stops. You usually see it in a movie, someone stops, and then there's like, think about like Alice in Twilight, if you guys saw that. You're just sitting there and then zoning out, and then they're watching this whole movie. Okay, so that's another example. Yeah, sometimes that happens where, there's this overlay of something else that's occurring that you're tuning into and seeing, feeling, or experiencing. Another can be the full manifestation of a loved one, and that person is having a whole exchange, like in Ghost, okay, with Whoopi Goldberg's character. So those are some pretty common examples, but not everyone is at the space in their development part where they haven't started consciously developing, where they're just chatting with those that are on the other side. But if you are experiencing some of these things, know that it's something you can develop to that point if that is something that you choose. Couple more things just with the visionary before we go on to those that are sound sensitive and have that clairaudient gift and ability, because a lot of people don't realize that they have that gift. Is if you've seen, say you're looking at somebody, I know this would happen to me sometimes when I was in a meeting and I would zone out. I'd be looking at someone and just kind of like seeing through them a little bit, and you see this little layer around the outside of their body that's usually a white color. You might also see it around plants or trees or other living things, but usually it's a layer just a few inches or so around the body. That's the etheric layer. It's the first part of the aura that most people are able to start sensing as they're developing. So you might see that even when you're not trying, or flashes of color around someone, especially when they're angry. Red is a big angry passion color, so you might sometimes see that. And the last one that's pretty relatable is precognitive dreams. So dreaming is really connected with people who are clairvoyant and have this visionary skill and dominance. So the dreaming world is very centric in the third eye. So if you are having precognitive dreams and you're seeing things play out in your dream world, that's an extension of what you're going to be able to learn to do consciously and intentionally in your day-to-day waking life. So it's a really exciting indicator as well. But don't worry, if you haven't had precognitive dreams, that doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to express yourself in this visual way. Now, one thing that's important to know is everybody has a dominant intuitive profile, but as you begin to develop your abilities, you learn to use all of these. So you can get messages in visual ways, in audio ways, through physical touch and sensations in your body, and through simply knowing something. I know this for sure. Those things can happen for you as a message comes in. So that's where it gets really fun, and you can get into lots of different layers, because as you're developing, Spirit has more and more ways to get information through to you, because suddenly you're paying attention to these channels. All right, let's talk about the sound sensitive. So this is the sound sensitive in my intuition quiz, which is at sedonamedium.com. If you're a sound sensitive, it means that your dominant language, the way that you have learned to connect with the spirit world, is through clairaudience. Clairaudience means that you are hearing spirit. And hearing spirit can happen either as your reading voice internally, or it can happen outside, in the world, like snap, 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 I'm hearing something, right? So here's some examples of what clairaudience can feel like, what those experiences can be. Having someone call your name and no one's there. So if you've ever had that experience, let me know in the comments, or let me know with a reaction, because I know that that's something that a lot of people have, and then they brush it off as like, that was kind of weird, right? Like you walk around the house and nobody's there, or you walk around the house and everybody says like, No, I didn't call you, weirdo. Yeah, tons of ringing in ears, Heather. That's a great example of clairaudience because you're really sensing that shift in vibration and shift in energy that's happening around you. I like to think of that like a pressure change that's happening around us. So I love that example. If you wake up sometimes and you find yourself humming or you're singing a song unconsciously, or just a song is kind of playing in your head, you just woke up and it's like, just a little bit. Oh, yeah, just a little. You're just really rocking out. And you take a moment and go, wait a minute, I'm like singing a song here. What is happening? Where is this coming from? When that happens, you can check in with yourself and go, wait a minute, does this have a message for me? That's a great example. And it happens sometimes when we're first waking up because we're in that super receptive zone. We're really, really open to the other side because we've kind of been in that space of suspended belief. When we go to sleep, we're automatically open and accepting that, hey, this side of us, unconsciously is existing. It's happening currently. We're not questioning. We're not going, wait, is this happening like we are in our waking world? So we're super open to those things, which is exciting. Guns N' Roses. Yes, love that. When you're writing, and suddenly an idea comes so quickly that you just can't keep up with it. It's like you're just scribbling it out. It's like coming through. This can happen when you're getting super creative and you're thinking about a problem that you're working on. It just suddenly starts flowing. Maybe it's a project or a new idea that you're excited about. It can also be when you are just channeling or bringing through messages. Writing and inspired writing is really connected with clairaudience. So if you are doing that, you are what I would call the sound sensitive. And so one of the ways that you're going to know the difference between your ego and whether it's coming from spirit is often it's so fast that it seems like you're having a hard time keeping up because it's not being generated by the mind. You're receiving that information. You may also at times hear something like talking, like a TV or radio has been left on. And you're walking around the house trying to figure out where is the sound coming from? And then suddenly it just stops and you realize, wait a minute, what was that? It's like you get a little glimpse into the spirit world when those ears and these channels are all opening, which is awesome. Okay, so let's talk about if you are epic instinct, which means that you are grounded in claircognizance. So if you have taken the intuition quiz at sedonamedium.com and you're epic instinct, this is one of the most challenging ones, I think, for people to recognize within themselves because your mind gets in the way more than even in other intuitive dominant languages where you are trying to justify and rationalize, where did I come up with this information? This doesn't make sense. Like I didn't see anything. I didn't have like a feeling. I just know this information. And so we have a tendency to squash that more than others because you can't rationalize it. You can't justify it. But that can be the most evidence that there's something powerful happening and powerful going on because when you have no justification, none whatsoever of where that information came from. And then on the other side, you're proven to be correct. It goes, whoa, I was really onto something. Okay. So it can be one of those things that even though on the front end, it's hard because you might dismiss your claircognizant abilities. Instead, what you may find is that it's the most powerful indicator of your intuition at work. So let's look at some real world examples of what claircognizance can look like. One of my biggest ones is mother's intuition. Sometimes moms, and this can be for dads too, it's just commonly we call it mother's intuition. It's just this strong knowing of something's wrong with my child. Something's happening. I had an experience with my son who was in Tucson, which was on a school field trip several hours away. And I walked in the door and I suddenly had this really strong feeling in my gut. And it was like something's wrong with Mason. And I had not heard anything that was going on. I, in fact, told my other children, get your shoes on, get ready. Because I'm thinking like I'm going to have to drive several hours to get down to Tucson. I don't know what's going on, but I know I need to have my phone on, checking in on Ring. And sure enough, within about 5 minutes, I get a phone call that he had run into some barbed wire and cut himself pretty bad and was going to the hospital. So The great news was I was in the car ready to go. We had gas in the tank and we were going. And somebody could look at that and go, like, that's kind of crazy, right? And argue with me like, what are you doing? But when you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you feel like something's wrong with your child, that can also be an example of that clear cognizant energy. Maybe you've also heard, I have a strong feeling that he just needs to be careful with that person. I don't know why. I just feel like something's off, something's not going to work out well. So you just really need to keep aware of that situation. Or I don't know why we need to buy trip insurance this time. I've never bought trip insurance before, but I know we just need trip insurance. I'm telling you, and sure enough, something happens where you need that trip insurance. If you have had that experience where you've said, I just know that I've had a past life in Egypt. I don't have any kind of experience that would lead me to that information. I just have a knowing deep within my soul, deep within my very essence and being, that this was an experience for me that I was connected with. That is another example of claircognizance at work. Okay. So our last one, and these are not all inclusive, I'm just giving you some very relatable examples. So our last one is we're going to talk about the empath. And a lot of people have empathic abilities. And if you are perhaps a dominant visionary, you probably are also noticing these empathic abilities as well. So if you are sound sensitive, you can also notice the empathic abilities also. So just keep that in mind, that you are able to express on all of these different channels, but there's always one that is just the strongest and indicates how energies in your wiring is flowing in your system. So the empath means that you are dominant in clairsentience, which is that feeling, the feeling in your body. So it can be the feeling in your physical body, so your body is a channel. It can also be the emotional feelings that you're having. So very, very, very sensitive in these particular areas. So what I want you to do is just really tune into yourself. When you do like a little scan, when you check in with your body, and when you're going places, you can notice when something feels off, because your body is reacting and responding to the energy that is around you. So let's look at a common example. If you walk into a place where something dramatic happened, okay, and that can be in a positive way, but let's use a negative sense of this, only because that's such a heavy and a dense energy that most people can really sense it. Say you walk into the doors of Auschwitz. People describe the intense gravity that is still left, like it scarred the landscape, because that energy is so dense, it's so heavy that you feel it like chills throughout your whole body. There is a reaction that our physical and emotional bodies have being there, being in those spaces. When you go to sacred places, so let's think of a cathedral or Stonehenge or the pyramids, special places, when you walk into those places, you feel the centuries of people singing and praising and the sacred prayer that's happened in those spaces. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your chest, and it lifts you in an emotional way. So it has a profound impact. That's an example of being an empath and feeling this clairsentient experience. Another is having pain from other people. So someone's hanging out with you and suddenly you get a headache, and turns out they have a headache, and this is just really a reflection of their headache. So when they leave, you can kind of release, let go. That pretty typically happens. People, a lot of empaths pick up on what's wrong with people first. Okay, it's like the first layer of contact or interaction. So you usually feel pain or disruption within the energy body first. If you feel someone looking at you, I don't know, I'm a really sensitive empath. This is not one that works for me. It works for like everybody else. I never feel anybody looking at me. And I think it's because I have so much energetic protection around me of like, this is my bubble now, that if you're staring at me, I don't know, I'm never going to know. So feeling somebody looking at you, that can be another example. Or if you are sensitive about you don't like to hold hands, or maybe you don't like to hug somebody that you don't know and don't feel safe with energetically, because you're going to just pick up that little energetic residue, okay? One of my favorite examples is if you are visiting or talking with somebody and they're super excited about something. They're like, yeah, let me tell you, especially a salesperson, right? Let me tell you about this project, this idea that I have. I can't wait to share this with you. And so they're talking and they're so engaging, and it's like magnetic, the energy that they're creating with that enthusiasm and that excitement. So you're totally like zoned in and dialed in. Let me know if you've had this experience, okay? And so you're like, yes, that sounds amazing. Like, I want to get involved, or I really, yes, I need that. That sounds incredible, right? And then you walk away, and about 30 minutes later, you're in this regret mode. Like, why in the world did I commit to this? And it's because you were sensing all of that enthusiasm energetically of the other person as if it was your own, to such that level of intensity that you forgot to really check in on your layers and go, let me check against myself and make sure I'm actually really excited to do this and that's something I want to do. If you have this issue, friends, my strategy for that is to, even if I'm really excited about something, I'll say, oh, I love this opportunity. Let me sit with that and I'll get back to you later today. I need at least a day to process and make sure I'm not picking up on that person's excitement and I'm really in alignment with what we're wanting to do. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention here is crying at other people's funerals. Have you ever been somewhere else? Or maybe you're crying at other people's graduations. You don't even know the people, okay? Like maybe you're there for someone else, for a friend, and maybe it's a distant association, but you're there and just feeling and sensing all the people around you and their emotions, and just the next thing you know, you're just like, oh, sobbing and tears, and this whole cleansing process is happening. Okay, another great example of living life as an empath. So those are the 4 dominant that you'll find in the quiz about your psychic pathways. So if you haven't taken the What is Your Intuitive Superpower quiz at SedonaMedium.com, please do that, because it's going to give you some clarity. Sometimes people think I'm going to register dominantly this way, and they're actually something else. And the reason that it's important for you to know and understand these channels is so you can start to recognize the magical things that are happening in your life right now, so that you can start building upon them. You can start expanding that awareness, realizing that your physical senses are merely a muted version of your big, expansive awareness that you have as a spirit being. And you can take these blinders off and suddenly be really aware of all the world that is happening around you, okay? And there's really that sense when we are claiming our true power, a true strength, that anything is possible, and we truly feel like we're at home because you're being your highest and best version of your natural self. So understanding your psychic pathways is really that first step in learning how to harness, hone, and increase your particular energy, okay? And then when you do that, you can share that awakening, that opening with your family and friends. So I want to check in. Do we have any questions at all? If you can pop those into the comments. I know there's a little bit of a delay sometimes in the live, so I'll give you just a minute or so because we're running a little long today. But I wanted to make sure I gave you a lot of really great information so that you could start to recognize this in yourself, okay? So I'm going to give you a minute to pop those in if you do have questions. One thing you can really do is start just practicing scanning your energy awareness of going, okay, I'm recognizing now that I'm receiving a lot of sensory input, but I know that there's a whole world that's happening beyond. Let me take a moment and let me just feel, what does it feel like to expand? What does it feel like to reach out into that world? And what's the feedback that I get? Start first. If you don't know where to start with your body. What does your body register? What is it sharing with you? What is it telling you? And know that these psychic pathways are how your spirit guides are able to reach out to you and speak to you directly when you are learning how to work with them. So this is how they share messages and information and communication with you. Okay? Wonderful. Gina, hi Gina. Do people always have a dominant? I feel like my claircognizance and empath are equal. Typically, yes, but like I was sharing early at the beginning, which you may not have been here for, is that as you begin to develop your sensitivity to higher and higher levels, what happens is that you expand into all of the different languages. So you're able to equally receive through all of those as you develop. So your claircognizance and your empath being equal is good. So through development work, what we would expect and want to see is that you're also beginning to receive more messages when it's appropriate to the message in an audio way and in a visual way. So that's going to be an indication of growth happening within your energetic system and growth happening in how you're accessing the spirit realms. Okay. But that's great. That's a really good indication that, hey, you've got some strong signals in the claircognizance, strong signals in the empath. We just want to continue to build even more on the visionary skills and the clairaudience skills. So exercising those, working really directly with your guides is one way you can open those up to higher and higher levels, because we can get information in all the different ways, but sometimes it's just more direct, or it's easier to send to us using a certain sense. Okay, so to be able to tell us a name directly, it's easier to either see that name or hear that name than it is necessarily to know that name and feel that name. So as we expand into all these, it really helps the accuracy and the amount of information that we can get in that direct communication with our guides. So I love your question. Great question. Thanks for asking it. Okay. All right. So I love sharing this time with you guys. Thank you so much for being with me. If you know someone who's really wanting to expand and grow their intuitive skills, if they maybe you're recognizing some of them in what we talked about today, go ahead and share this with them. I would love if you would give more information to other people who need to or feel guided to grow their skills. The more that we do that, the more that we share as a community, the more we're lifting the vibration in our world and environment. And also when you have other family members and friends who are engaged in developing their intuition, we develop community and also develop more accountability and help hold ourselves to a place of, well, have you thought about this? Are you doing this? Are you feeling really connected with what it is that you're doing right now? So that accountability is key in our growth mindedness for creating intuition and connecting with our spirit guides for the long haul. All right, everybody. Love to all of you. Have a beautiful day. Take care. Enjoy. Bye-bye.